All right, so I'll call to order this meeting of the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability at 6:02 p.m. And we'll go through the roll call. Tara Dunderdale.
Here.
Here. Justin Vassell, I'm here. Matt Austin.
Present.
Present. Zero Rose. I don't see him online or in the room. Zach Ammerman.
Here.
Here. Dave Rollo. I don't see Dave online or in the room. Quentin Gilly.
Here.
Here. Ross Carlson.
Here.
Here. Alex York.
Can you
Mute.
We don't have you on audio.
Here, remote.
Perfect. Thank you. Here, remote. Jamie Scholl.
Here.
Here. Annalise Janke.
Here.
Here. Diana Ogrodowski.
Here.
Here. And Shanghai Shu.
Here.
Here. Perfect. All right, we have a quorum, so we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. So we've got a few things on the agenda today. We've got a resolution for first reading, which basically applauds the efforts of the council and the city in the work that they did during the appropriation or the lapse in federal appropriations in being able to provide resources and funding for continued staff benefits. We'll also vote on dissolving the ad hoc committee that we stood up in late 2024 to produce a sustainability assessment report. And then I think the bulk of the meeting will probably go towards the presentation that we're going to see from Zach about methods for estimating transportation related greenhouse gas emissions. And we also have Wes DiSilvestro, and I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, with us as an expert guest who can help field any questions that we're going to have during that presentation. And that's mostly it for the agenda. So just, out of respect for Wes's time, I'd like to make an adjustment to the agenda so that we can move that item up a little bit earlier on. But before we can actually amend the agenda, we have to bring it up for approval. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, perfect. So then I'll move to amend the agenda so that item 7B occurs after item 5, which is public comment, and before item 6, which is reports from commissioners. Is there a second for that motion? Second. Okay, wonderful. Any discussion? Okay, since we do have some folks online, some commissioners online, we'll do it through a roll call vote. So this is, let me just write this down here.
Are we voting on the
Amendment.
action and the amendment?
The amendment.
Approval and the amendment together?
No, just the amendment, I think. In case somebody else has something else they want to move. Okay, so yeah, so this is on amending the agenda in that manner. Tara Dunderdale.
Yes.
Yes. Justin Vassell. Yes. Matt Austin.
Yes.
Yes. Zero Rose is still absent. Zach.
Yes.
Yes. Councilmember Rollo is not present. Quentin.
Yes.
Yes. Ross.
Yes.
Yes. Alex.
Yes.
Yes. Jamie.
Yeah.
Yes. Annalise.
Yes.
Yes. Diana.
Yes.
Yes. And Shanghai.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. The agenda is amended. Are there any further amendments to the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we will vote to approve the agenda. So Tara.
Yes.
Yes. Justin. Yes. Matt.
Yes.
Yes. Zero is not here. Zach.
Yes.
Yes. Councilmember Rollo is not here. Quentin.
Yes.
Yes. Ross.
Yes.
Yes. Alex.
Yes.
Yes. Jamie.
Yes.
Yes. Annalise.
Yes.
Yes. Diana.
Yes.
Yes. And Shanghai.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. The agenda is approved. So now we will move on to approval of the minutes from December 9th. Are there any corrections to those minutes as they were circulated last week? Okay. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
We'll send it here, and then do you want a second?
Second, yeah.
Yeah, perfect, okay. There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes from December 9th, 2025. We'll do a roll call vote for that as well. So Tara.
Yes.
Yes. Justin, yes. Matt?
Yes.
Yes. 0 is absent. Zach?
Yes.
Yes. Councilmember Rallo is absent. Quentin?
Yes.
Yes. Ross?
Yes.
Yes. Alex?
Yes.
Yes. Jamie? Yes. Annalise?
Yes.
Yes. Diana?
Abstain. I was
Abstain. Okay. And Shanghai?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. The minutes are approved as circulated. Okay, so that brings us to public comment. So we've got up to 3 minutes per person for a total of about 10 minutes for public comment for anyone in the room and online. There's nobody in the room in the gallery right now, so if there's anyone online from the public who would like to comment, feel free to raise your hand. Give it a moment. Sometimes it takes me a little while to find the mute button even, so hang tight for a moment. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so that'll do it for public comment. Okay, so normally that would bring us to reports from commissioners, but we've amended the agenda, so now we'll move on to item 7B. So I guess I can just, so you're going to present some slides. And I think Jolie is planning to drive because there's some, or I can drive, somebody can drive. I know there's some animated
Yeah.
components to it.
Yeah, I think Sean and Wes are going to speak,
Yes.
say something briefly beforehand, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. So I'd like to introduce Wes Silvestro. He is with Climate Nave. We've been working with him for the past couple of years. He provides our greenhouse gas inventories every year and also is responsible for creating our climate action plan dashboard. And so I'll turn it over to Wes. Thank you so much, Wes, for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you, Sean, for having me. And it's definitely an honor to speak before the commission. I haven't had a chance to actually chat with the commission for the city of Bloomington, although I have presented the greenhouse gas inventory report that we've published over the past 2 years with the city council. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Bloomington and all the work the commission and everyone else is doing. I spoke with, both Sean and Zach individually, but, they know I'm a huge fan because I work with a number of communities across the country, and I think Bloomington really stands out as being particularly invested in climate action and really step far and above what a lot of other cities your size are doing. And so it always really inspiring to see how engaged everyone is. And I think Zach's presentation today is a perfect example of that. Zach will share a lot more detail in his presentation, but I'm sure everyone's familiar with what a greenhouse gas inventory is, but just for the sake of a little bit of preamble, I thought I would give a quick explanation and some context before we lead into his slides, which he's done an excellent job on. So the purpose of a greenhouse gas inventory is really to try to get an estimate of the amount of emissions that are occurring within a specific community, right? So you can think of, you might have heard, with the past few years, people are becoming a lot more climate conscious. You have corporations trying to figure out their supply chain, how much emissions they contribute. You have countries trying to figure out how much emissions that they contribute to the global atmosphere. And then now, cities as well are really interested in figuring out what that number is. And so there's actually a really sophisticated set of protocols that have been developed over the last 2 decades, because this is kind of a bit of an art, kind of a bit of a science to how you do the accounting with this. And there's no specific formula you can apply. There's a lot of discretion and kind of subjective measurements you have to put into it. Sean can attest to this, but every year when we go do the inventory, one of the really huge challenges is often just getting the data. So one of the ways that we try to approximate what emissions are occurring in the city is to look at all of the different potential sources of where those emissions originate. So you can think of all the different types of activities that happen in everyday life and how those might drive emissions. Things like driving your car around, and the food that you eat, whether it's more meat or plant-based, if you're using electricity or natural gas to heat your home or power your different appliances, all of those things together come to generate emissions. It's obviously really hard to measure that on a specific basis. I can't tell you exactly how much carbon's going up into the sky because that's pretty much impossible to measure. But what I can do is I can look at things that are upstream of the sources of emissions and data sources that correlate really closely with that. And that's what the protocol does. It gives us a way of looking at those sources upstream, doing some math and fancy statistics on that, and then that gives us a way to kind of generate a greenhouse gas inventory report. One thing that we've done with Bloomington the past few years, which is really innovative, is we've sought to try to be really, really rigorous with this methodology. So we've put a lot of thought into this. but a lot more consistent, in each year-over-year inventory, so that the numbers can be compared and actually commensurate between years than most communities, are able to kind of invest in. And, Sean has kind of really been at the helm of making sure that this is like really data-driven policy, that, the commission is able to have access to data to be able to help support, that the city council is able to look at, et cetera, and that decisions can be made for funding that are data-driven. And so, hat tip to her for all the effort on that, and we've been really happy to be able to support that. And so what Zach's going to present today is kind of these really great slides about how within one sector of emissions, which is transportation, we have, like I said, many different ways we can kind of measure where transportation emissions come from. And there's been, basically a limitation in the data sets we've had available to measure those emissions. And Zach did some awesome work to basically say, hey, the last few years we've only been measuring emissions for, a subset of those emissions. There's a bunch of emissions we've missed. We knew we were missing those emissions. It wasn't, something that was unfamiliar, but there just wasn't an easy way to approximate it. And every year we look at the science, we try to find new data sets and see if there's a better way to do it. And we kind of, Zach put together a really good case study for how a few other cities are measuring an area of emissions that we now can start measuring using some Google data. And we're actually going to be updating this next year's inventory using some of the feedback that Zach gave. So I thought, with Sean and I both thought this was an awesome kind of case study and educational opportunity to show how the inventory is not kind of a static thing, it's evolving year over year. And it's, an art and a science, and we love, seeing this type of engagement from people who look into the data and give thoughts on how we can do it better. So I will hand it over to Zach, who has created probably one of the most beautiful PowerPoints I've ever seen online. It's aesthetically very pleasing.
Thank you.
I think it's, Sean knows I really pride myself in our firm really putting out like really nice looking reports. But, I think I saw this, my first reaction was, oh my gosh, we have the competition. This is beautiful. So,
Thank you very much.
Zach, thank you for the great work
Thank
here. And really looking forward to this.
Awesome.
Okay, real quick before we start, I just want to, so for, I think the intention was to have some opportunity for discussion after these slides and things. So we've got about 30 minutes total set aside on the agenda for this. So if you're, having questions and stuff on certain slides, if it's really vital to understanding what's going on, feel free to jump in. But if it's just general questions, we can save those for the end, and then we can, do presentation and then do discussion for the most part. So great. With that,
Okay, cool.
I'll hand it back over to you, Zach.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, everybody. And to start things off, I just want to say, while I was looking at this, I looked at a whole bunch of different cities' greenhouse gas inventories. I just want to say, I think Bloomington's is actually considerably better than most others. So this is in no way meant to disparage at all the work that you guys have done. Wes, yours is much more thorough and detailed in your methodology than most. So broadly speaking, I think yours is far better. So I just want to start off by saying that kudos to you guys for that. And this is in no way meant to be hypercritical or anything. I think we can make it better, and it sounds like we already maybe are. So broadly speaking, this is on different methods for counting greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. I'm just going to maybe move. Can I minimize that right there? Hide from there? Okay, cool. Really briefly, the background. Transportation, as many of you probably are aware, is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions nationwide. This is the current baseline nationwide for where greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. This comes from the EPA, while it still exists. Unfortunately, it might be in danger, but this data might be in danger, but right now it's still here. So transportation is currently 28% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And the largest single source of emissions, largest subcategory is effectively personal vehicle use. So, and most personal vehicle use are short trips. So I'm talking you guys driving to the meeting tonight, going to the grocery store, that sort of a trip. That is one of the largest single sources of greenhouse gas emissions nationwide. So knowing that it's this big chunk that's approaching 30% total of our greenhouse gas emissions, when I saw our current baseline, this is Bloomington's current baseline, the sliver seemed a little bit small to me. So that's what prompted this. Me starting to dig into this and kind of uncovering a little bit of this. So the transportation emissions in Bloomington right now, I think it's at maybe 14% of our emissions using our current baseline. Most of our emissions, it shows our inventory shows is coming from energy, meaning like electricity generation. We get a lot of our power from coal, for example. So it makes sense that's a big source of it. But I still thought maybe the transportation was a little low, so I looked into it a little bit. A little bit more background. There are many other studies like this out there. This one is fairly representative, so I brought it in for this presentation. This is a 2021 study from Nature Communications that finds that cities across the nation are underestimating their emissions by an average of around 18.3%. And that if you extrapolated that average out to the entire country, they study 48 cities, but if they said if it's 18.3% on average, we extended that out to every city in the country, it would be the equivalent of having an extra California plus 23% of a California on top of emissions. It's a hefty chunk of emissions that is potentially being uncounted. And specifically cited in this report is one of the major reasons for the undercounting of municipal emissions is using different methods for estimating transportation emissions. So just to talk about the scale of the problem, it's a major amount of emissions that are potentially being uncounted nationwide. So how are greenhouse gas emissions calculated from transportation? This is a very simplified diagram. I just want to underline that extremely simplified is much more complicated than that. But what I want to underline is that the process in the United States typically uses what's called a bottoms-up approach using vehicle miles traveled as the baseline. So vehicle miles traveled is the total number of miles traveled by vehicles in a given area over a given period of time. You start with VMT. From there, you divvy it up by vehicle classes. So whether you have hybrid, how many hybrid vehicles there are, how many electric vehicles there are, how many SUVs, and that sort of stuff you can get from vehicle registration data. This public data that's relatively easily accessible. From there, you divvy it up what types of fuels are those vehicles using, and then at the end, that gives you CO2 emissions. But what is important is the vehicle miles traveled is where it starts. And if you have a wrong estimate on vehicle miles traveled at the beginning, everything else after it is going to be wrong, and you're going to end up with a wrong number at the end. So if we're undercounting VMT, that can lead to undercounting emissions at the end. So that's the key thing to understand here. Again, that's a very simplified diagram. It's much more complicated than that. So how are we calculating VMT? So on the left, you've got what the city of Bloomington's current inventory uses. And this is due to a limitation in INDOT data, Indiana Department of Transportation data. But there now is another source of data out there that I'm going to get to later. But there is a reason why they were doing this. But so the city of Bloomington current system, under all of these diagrams, the solid blue line is a car trip that is being counted, and a dotted pink line is a car trip that is not being counted. So if somebody gets in their car and, say, drives to Indianapolis every day, the moment they get on I-69 and cross the city limits, they are no longer counting that trip. The rest of the trip is uncounted. It is only the portion that is within the city limits that is counted under our current system. I'm going to skip over the middle one and come back to that in a second. Over to the right is the full VMT method, which I'm just including for information. I don't necessarily think we should use it, but it gives you a good upper limit. Any trip that starts or ends in the city, you count the entire trip. So I'm going to do some examples in a second to show you in detail what that would look like, but basically that leads to overcounting. So on the left, I think we're undercounting a little bit. On the right, I think we're overcounting by quite a bit. In the middle, you have the induced traffic model, which comes from the GPC protocol. I'm going to talk about what that is in a second. And there's a simplified diagram. It's a bit more complicated than this, but broadly speaking, to start off with, it's the same as our current system. Any trip that's fully within the city is fully counted. But any trip that starts or ends outside of the city, you count 50% of what happens outside of the city. And I'm going to show you why right here in the next one, if it will go for it. There we go. So this is an example of someone who commutes every day from Indianapolis. I think it is a good conservative estimate. I think it might actually be higher than that, is roughly 13% of Bloomington's workforce, so it's a fairly large number of people we're talking about that are doing this trip every day. So on the left, under Bloomington's current system, somebody gets in their car, they start driving, that portion is counted in Bloomington. They get on I-69, cross the city limits, their trip is no longer counted. For the sake of argument, let's act like Indianapolis uses the same system for all of these. They don't actually, but for sake of argument, ideally all cities would be using a similar system so they could compare. So let's pretend they're using the same system for all these examples. The entire trip between Bloomington and Indianapolis will be uncounted by either city. And the moment they reach the city limits in Indianapolis, it starts being counted again by Indianapolis. But the giant bulk of their trip in between, which is the bulk of emissions, the bulk of miles traveled, is being entirely uncounted under the system. On the far right, you have the full I'm going to jump over the middle one again, just like I did a second ago. The full VMT on the far right, the entire trip would be double counted by both cities, or counted by both cities, meaning the entire trip is double counted. So that is overcounting. So on the left, we're undercounting a big chunk. On the right, far right, we're double counting the entire trip. The reason why we have the induced traffic model that I talked about a minute ago is this right here, is that the trip would be fully accounted for. Ideally, and in practice, and it would actually be a little bit more messy, and there might still be a little bit that's uncounted, a little bit that's double counted, but it's closer to having the full trip accounted for, where the trip is split between both cities, and fully, you kind of assigning the blame, so to speak, between both cities. You're not leaving any part uncounted. So that's that. Let me move on. So what is the GPC protocol? Just briefly, I'm not going to go into this too long. This was developed by ICLEI, WRI, and C40 Cities. released in 2014. It's kind of become the gold standard for municipal greenhouse gas inventories. Its adoption by municipalities is growing, and it standardizes inventories for easier apples-to-apples comparisons between cities. So you can see which cities you can truly compare between cities, and you're not just using completely different methodology. We use this method, but I'll get into something that part in a second. This is the next part. We use this method broadly, but there's one. Hold on, it's not wanting to. What's going on? There we go. So the GPC divides emissions into 3 scopes. Scope 1 is within the city boundary. Scope 2 just deals with grid supply to energy, so I'm going to skip over that. I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. Scope 3, though, is really what I want to hammer, and that is all greenhouse gas emissions that occur outside of the city boundary as a result of activities taking place within the city. So that includes emissions that are from vehicle trips that are happening because the city exists. We should include those. That's what the GPC calls for as much as possible. Bottom line on this slide is that we are doing Scope 3 emissions as we should for every category except for a tiny handful like railways, maybe 1 or 2 others, I can't remember, and transportation. Transportation being the big one that we're not doing it. And it's because there's a limitation in the data, but that limitation no longer exists. So I'm going to get into that in a minute. But that leads to, because we were using Scope 3 emissions in all other categories except for transportation, that's compounding the undercounting issue because it makes the other categories look bigger and the transportation look even smaller. So just something to highlight. Okay, so now what is the scale of potential uncounted miles that we're talking about? This uses census data. Just really quickly, this is completely valid. Something that is completely valid to use for at least including in your vehicle emissions, vehicle miles traveled emissions estimate. The city of Ann Arbor uses it in its calculation of VMT, and ICLEI, which is a major organization I'm going to get to in a second. I mentioned it a minute ago. I'm going to mention it again at the end. Lists this type of data specific as something that's a potential source of VMT estimates. So this is completely valid to use as estimates. So more than 1 out of 5 workers in Bloomington are commuting more than 50 miles to their job every day. That is the highest rate among Indiana's largest cities. And less than half are commuting under 10 miles. So we've got a lot of super commuters in the city. On all of these charts, the dark blue numbers are the numbers that I think we are currently mostly accounting for under our current system. Anything in pink, I think we are largely not counting. So workers, so this is Bloomington workforce by commute distance. Over here we've got workers. So there's the people coming in that work in the city. There's roughly 11,000, 21%, that are coming more than 50 miles to get to Bloomington every day to work. The vast majority of those miles are not being counted. Again, and this here is number of people, not number of miles. So these people are going 50 miles, and these people are going like maybe 5, let's say. It's going to be the portion is going to get a lot worse than it looks right there. Residents out. So this is outflows. People that live in Bloomington. Roughly 60% are going around 10 miles or less, but you've still got about 20% that are going more than 50 miles to work every single day. That's a hefty number of miles that aren't being fully accounted for. So this is a baseline number this is a very conservative estimate of what this top figure would look like in number of miles. I used the lowest number for each category and just multiplied it out, and the highest number for this, so I overcounted this and undercounted all these. So it's at least this bad in terms of number of daily miles that we're talking about that are being, the ones in pink are largely being uncounted. Again, the very beginning or end of each trip will be counted. And the ones in blue are largely being counted. Again, there might be 1 or 2 miles on each trip that isn't because they might be coming just outside of the city or whatever. But that gives you a baseline conservative estimate of the number of miles we're talking about. So over here we have commute patterns. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the census data, and then I'll get. But I think this is important because it underscores the scale that we're talking about here. In dark pink, you have people that live inside of Bloomington and commute outside. So that's 20%. A big chunk live outside of Bloomington, commute in, 60% of Bloomington's workforce, and then you've got about 20% that live in Bloomington and commute inside of Bloomington. So these in pink are largely, at least partially, being uncounted. This is the only category on this entire page that I know is fully being accounted for under our current transportation system. So I just want to highlight the scale of the potential number of miles that we're talking about. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this just gives you an idea of, on the left you've got Bloomington residents by the county that they work in. So in dark blue, it's Monroe County. And again, not all of these people necessarily work in Bloomington. The majority probably do. I just did it by county because it was easier to categorize. I had it by city, and there were 8 million things. You couldn't see anything, so I did it by county instead. But there's a big chunk that go into Marion County every day. And there's a big, substantial portion going into all these other little counties here and then all other locations. So there's a big chunk going outside of the county for work every day. This is Bloomington workers by county of residence. These are to the same scale, so you can see the size we're talking about. So these are Bloomington workers by the county they live in, and not all of this, only about half of this Monroe County chunk actually lives in Bloomington. The others live outside of Bloomington in the Monroe County. So basically from here up are people whose commutes are at least partially not being counted. In some cases, we've got like, there were a handful that said like Fort Wayne, like in states, so people are making. There's a handful of super commuters in towns that their miles are not being counted. Anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is just the same data showing you the direction and the number of people going. For the sake of time, I'm just going to skip over that. It's repeating the same basic trend of what I was showing you before. Okay, so how are peer cities measuring vehicle miles traveled for greenhouse gas inventory? So I looked at, as I mentioned, I looked at a whole bunch of different cities. I tried to look at medium-ish size college towns, roughly the same category. Most of them have a fairly large university, and how they are measuring vehicle miles traveled for greenhouse gas inventories. The ones in pink are the ones using the induced traffic model that I think we should switch to using. I think we're going to start including it, sounds like, which is great. The ones in blue are the ones that use the same system Bloomington does, which is in-boundary only. And you'll see the ones with the asterisks on them. All the ones that have an asterisk used to be in blue and switched to the pink category in the recent years. So there's a trend towards that as the data becomes available. And I think we should try to follow that trend. So this is just the same data. I included the ones, so just to make it clear that I wasn't cherry picking and only finding the ones I found several that I couldn't find an answer to. Durham and Chapel Hill, both in North Carolina, were unclear, and Burlington was the only one that uses a completely different method that isn't very common in the U.S. So anyway, just to show you, this is all of the cities that I could find a greenhouse gas inventory for that met the criteria of a medium-ish sized college town, and the majority are using the induced traffic model. This is the same number of cities as the number of greenhouse gas emissions per household from transportation for all these cities. In blue, you have the ones that were in blue on the other page, and pink, they're the ones that were in pink on the other page. And the important thing to retain here is this line back here is the average for the induced traffic cities in pink, and the average for the in-boundary only cities. The point here is not to make us look worse, and so that our emissions are worse. It's to where potentially this is the average for those cities, where potentially there's a potential big amount of emissions that we're just not capturing. That's really what I'm trying to hammer here. If you use an induced traffic model, you're capturing more of the emissions that are actually being caused by the city. And I also just want to there's a couple cities that have switched. I highlighted Ames here. This is Ames's old greenhouse gas emissions, and this is what it turned into when they started using the induced traffic model. More than doubled. This is what our current emissions are. This is what I believe, if we used, I'm going to get into what this is in a minute, the Google data. This is what our emissions per household would be, and this is if we use the full VMT method, which I don't think we should use, because I think it's overcounting. But just to give you an idea, this gives you a good idea of the range. We're somewhere in between these probably, and the induced traffic model is right in the middle. The number of megatons of CO2 per household would be around 9, so it's a little less than doubling. Again, this is just a list of other cities that use the induced traffic model around the world. This includes Toronto, London, Paris, Mexico City, Madrid, Lisbon, etc. Just to show you, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just a list that report their emissions, the Climate Disclosure Project. Just to show you that we'd be in good company doing this. LA, South Bend is on there, Tokyo, etc. So I'll skip over that quickly. Okay, so there is now another source of data that allows us to calculate VMT. It has some flaws and it has some pluses and minuses. I'm going to get into that in a second. But this is what we are using to calculate VMT now, which is from INDOT, Indiana Department of Transportation, and the number of vehicle miles traveled per year for a year. And this is the Google Environmental Insights Explorer data that allows us to do the same thing, but with an induced traffic model, that model that I think we should use. And it's showing it's a little bit less than doubling the number of miles traveled. And I also just want to highlight this data goes back to 2018, so we can compare to previous years. That's a positive. So it would, just like our current data, I think our actual inventory started in 2018. We could compare backwards.
The baseline is
Yeah,
2018,
yeah.
yeah.
So it wouldn't necessarily change too much in that respect. This is that translated into greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. I included Crosswalk Labs as just another source. I don't actually think we should use it because it's got some major flaws to it, so I don't think we should use it. But that's just showing you as another source of greenhouse gas emissions estimated for the city of Bloomington. Our current estimate is 176,000 megatons of CO2 for transportation. This is finding 303,000, so a little bit less than doubling our greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. And this is that same data just showing compared to our current emissions inventory. on top is just raw emissions, and on the bottom is percentage. So we'd be a little bit less than doubling, and we'd be going from around a little bit less than 15% to close to 23% of our emissions from transportation if we were to use this model. Yeah, so concluding, got a few more slides, got maybe 5 more slides. So data sources and their issues. So the data that is needed to calculate a GPC-compliant induced traffic emissions model is now available and freely accessible by anyone using Google's Environmental Insights Explorer. I'm going to get into a little more detail about the pluses and minuses of that for a second. But basically the way it works is it tracks anyone who has a smartphone that has Google Maps on it. They are tracking where you are. I mean, we already know they're doing this. It's not like, I'm not like gung-ho about it, but they're doing that. It's the exact same technology that they use to tell you where a traffic jam is when you're going through traffic or whatever, and tells you how long it's going to take. It's essentially the same thing. It is a massive data set because it's using anyone with a cell phone that has Google Maps on it, which is about as close to everyone as you can get. And it is more granular than most public data sources. So that's a huge plus, and it's positive in its column. I just want to point out that among the peer cities that I looked at, and this is a non-exhaustive list, there are plenty of other cities out there that are probably doing this, but these are the ones that I found. This data source is being used as the main or only source of transportation emissions data for Boulder, Madison, Berkeley, and Lawrence, Kansas. Those are just among the cities that I looked at for the pure emissions. I also know Athens, Greece is using it exclusively, and Seattle, Austin, Texas, San Jose, Hartford, and Pittsburgh are also using it in some capacity. Again, this is a non-exhaustive list. There are many other, I'm sure there are many others that could go on this list. These are just the ones that I happen to find. The reason why I'm telling you that is we would not be like going out on a limb here, being the first ones doing this. There are many other cities that have already done it. So the bottom line for me is that public data with clearer methodology would be preferable, and I'm going to get into the methodology question in a second. If it allowed us for calculating VMT that included induced traffic, but it doesn't. It just doesn't right now. It's just the way it is. And so I think it's leading to undercounting greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. So about the Environmental Insights Explorer, I'm going to go into some pluses and minuses here. So it does not give a full A to Z methodology, which is a very valid criticism. It is a little bit of a black box, so I don't think it's as big of a black box as some people have called it, because we know essentially what they're doing. They're just tracking cell phone movement. And they go into their methodology here and here. I included some links there if you're curious about it. They're just tracking cell phone movement, anybody that has a Google Maps thing. What we don't know and what is a black box is the algorithm they're using after that. But we know that the basic input is, and I think it's pretty reliable. They've also conducted ground truthing comparisons of their data in collaboration with the city governments of Mountain View, California, and Boulder, Colorado, where they estimated how much traffic was going to be at different times of day on certain streets. And then they put actual sensors on the road and counted them, and they found an average 0.9 correlation, which is about as close to copy and pasting from one to the other as you can get. That's very high. And they even in some areas found 0.99, which is insane, crazy high. So it seems to be fairly accurate. I don't think it's as big of a black box as some might say, which it is a little bit of a black box because we don't know what the algorithm is, which is a fair criticism. But we know the basic technology that they're using is cell phones. So I don't think it's that crazy of an idea. ICLEI, which is an organization that helps local governments, I'm sure the city staff know ICLEI well. They help local governments come up with sustainability and climate change things. They actually help develop inventories for some cities. Issued a report. There's an overview up here that's more abridged and a very detailed assessment down at the bottom for European Union policymakers about the viability of the EIE for transportation emissions. They basically said try it, that it's worth trying. And they, by the way, are the ones that helped develop the GPC protocol that I've been talking about. So they think it's a valid and perfectly valid thing to be using for transportation emissions. So that being said, I'm going to move on. There are detractors, though. And I just wanted to point, I don't want it to just give an all positive thing of the EIE. There are detractors, and some of these criticisms are valid. This is an article in Urban Studies from 2025, so very recent, that is highly critical, although I want to highlight that it's almost entirely on philosophical grounds. And I actually agree with some of those philosophical arguments, but that doesn't change the fact that the data is there, and it's available, and it's, I think, fairly accurate. So the main critiques from this are that it increases reliance on big tech, and that it increases the power imbalances between local governments and large corporations. I completely 100% agree with this. That is 100% true. But that doesn't change what I said, that it's fairly accurate, it's free, and it would help us do an induced traffic model. So I do agree with that, though. Number two, it may undercount users without cell phones in mode split calculations. There's a way around that, though.
What is mode split?
So when I was talking about the equation at the very beginning, when I said you go VMT to the type of vehicle to fuel type to that type of vehicle, mode split, and who's in a car versus a bus versus a, you can get that from other public data sources. You don't necessarily have to rely on the EIE entirely for that. So there's a way you can kind of get around that. And I also think we are underestimating the number of people that actually do have cell phones. Many people who even don't have homes have cell phones. Many of them still have cell phones. Like I don't think we're undercounting that much. And if we're really worrying about undercounting, the NDOT data is data set is a dramatically smaller data set compared to the EIE thing, which is a massive thing that's anybody that has a cell phone, versus the NDOT thing, which is just every couple of years they put some sensors down on the road and that's what you get. So you're kind of undercounting both ways, and I think there are ways you can get around that potential concern. I'm not saying it's not a valid concern, but I think there's ways around it. Number 3, they said that cities cannot alter the EIE's indicator themselves. Although you can tweak the parameters of them, they allow you a lot of independence on that. And I kind of found that argument to be a little bit silly. That being said, the last one I think is 100% valid, but it does not apply to Bloomington at all, is that the EIE does not count at all things like rickshaws or tuk-tuks or informal forms of transportation like ferries in some cities they mentioned. And that's completely valid, but it doesn't apply to Bloomington. We don't have any rickshaws or tuk-tuks here. So that's valid. So I do, yeah, go ahead.
Does it apply to like bicycles?
Yeah, no, it includes but they're
bicycles in the mode split?
They are in the,
okay.
they're included as a calculatable thing in the EIE already. Yeah, but it's the other things that are more specific to global south context, rickshaws, tuk-tuks, things like that, they didn't think of in their equation, which was a major flaw, and that is a valid criticism, but it doesn't apply to us. Mm-hmm. So all that being said, there are valid criticisms of it. And I'm honestly more likely to be accused of being a Luddite than anything else. I'm very anti-big tech, but I do think when they do something good, we should maybe use it. I think this is something that we could potentially use. So final thoughts, last slide, bottom line. Our current method of calculating transportation emissions is likely undercounting transportation because it's not including traffic induced by the city but that takes place elsewhere. And census data suggests that is substantial. Public or open data sources are preferable, and we should explore if there are viable alternative methods, but I don't think there are. If there are, I'm all for them, but I don't think there are. So if an alternative is not available, I'm just pointing out that Google's EIE provides a viable, immediately accessible, and free alternative method that's compliant with the GPZ protocol and accounts for induced traffic. And it's already used by a large variety of peer cities. There are other sources out there. Most of them are private and can get quite expensive. Streetlight data is another major one that many cities are using that I saw. It is very expensive. It is highly detailed. It's very expensive, but I just want to point out they're using basically the exact same thing that Google's EIE is. They're just tracking cell phones. That's how they do it. They don't, and it's even more of a black box. They don't really fully tell you what it is because it's entirely proprietary. But many cities use it for transportation planning, broadly speaking, for a whole bunch of different applications. And that seems to be the main competitor to Google's EIE, and it's using the same technology, basically. Yeah, so I mean, that's basically it. The bottom line is I think we should, and it sounds like we may already be doing this, consider at least including EIE data in our emissions data alongside NDOT data at the very least to show what the range of possibilities for our greenhouse gas emissions from transportation are. And that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions or anything. But.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Zach. That was a very beautiful presentation, as Wes mentioned, and really insightful. So I'll open it up to the group here for questions, comments, general discussion. Tara.
This is incredible. I feel like I learned so much. Thank you. Is there concern in the field of a price bait and switch? Like if we kind of like put our eggs in this basket, that then they'll go in a year. Actually, now it costs twice what you were paying streetlight data. Like, is that what I was thinking?
Wes can maybe answer that. I don't see that happening with this. This is more Google like trying to pretend that they're good for the world. They aren't, but they're trying to pretend. I see this as really them trying to. I don't see them doing it. Maybe Wes has an opinion that is different. I don't know.
I think Zach's right. It's probably mostly driven by them wanting to kind of have a little bit of like a PR stunt, so to speak. I will say the biggest concern with Google is they discontinue a lot of stuff, like a lot of really great things. And so, that would be the biggest concern. But yeah, no, I think at least for a few years it should be fine. And the good thing is it has started a conversation. Like Zach pointed out, a lot of articles have been written about this, and that people in academia are talking about it. So even if they did kind of pull it out and start using it, I think people will have a motivation to find an alternative. But that's a very good question.
I see Alex has a question on Zoom, his hand raised. Go ahead, Alex.
Fantastic presentation. I was wondering, I know the greenhouse gas protocol is currently doing a big update that's, from what I've seen, seems to be centered largely around like scope 2 emissions. I didn't know if during that there was any updating that they're also doing to these scope 3 emissions that we should maybe be watching closely and accounting for before we make any changes.
I didn't see anything. Maybe Wes is aware of that more than I am, but I'm not aware of that, no.
Yeah, nothing immediately comes to mind, but we do always check each year with the inventory. And I think like one of the good things I wanted to emphasize coming out of this presentation is that, back to the point of it being art and science, we have to think about like, what are we using the inventory for, right? I think at the end of the day, every city has a different set of considerations about what they're using it for. It's ultimately usually like to drive, a policy outcome. And you could imagine, maybe you have a better representation of what percentage of emissions goes to each sector, right? Like we're undercounting transportation now, but and so if we add EIE data, we might be able to fix that. But maybe you add a different data source that gets you closer, but it's super unpredictable, right? It changes year over year, and it's not as maybe trustworthy as the Google data. Well, there's another policy aim that we have with this tool of the inventory, which is we want to be able to track if the work we're doing in Bloomington and the programs we're funding and everything else is that actually like moving that particular category of emissions down. And it's going to take a few years to see that, so you have to keep measuring it, and there's obviously variability. But that's where getting to the kind of black box comment, which after really looking into it, I kind of agree with Zach. It's probably not as much of a black box as people will say, but that's why we have such a concern with that type of thing. And that's also why we're a little bit careful when we're looking at changing inventory updates or how the protocol is changing, because we want to really make sure that we're consistent year over year. Because if not, then it's like, okay, well, sure, you've done the exercise of doing the inventory, but did that even meet the point of it, right? It's like the city's spending money on something that's not actually even a valuable policy tool. So we're always really careful on that. And that's something Sean's always done a good job of emphasizing as a goal.
A second question, I guess mostly for Wes and Sean. It sounds like this is already being implemented, so other than saying, good job, way to go, is there a role for the commission to potentially be supportive or helpful in anything related to this?
Well,
How about you, Sean?
Oh, thank you, Wes. I had mentioned to Zach before the meeting that I would love to see the commission, if you're really interested in reducing transportation emissions. I put forth the idea a couple years ago when I was a BCOS member to potentially try to launch an anti-idling campaign, a voluntary anti-idling campaign. And so that's something that we could talk about if you're interested, what that would look like and what type of support that we could provide. Another thing I wanted to highlight is the Bloomington Energy Works program. That's a program where we're trying to gather a list of energy efficiency and solar projects worth a minimum of $50 million by April 15th. And projects that would qualify are EV charging stations. And so we would love to see, multifamily units add their EV charging stations to our list, businesses, manufacturers, and really try to spread out the EV charging stations that are available across our city. So not only in Bloomington, but also in Monroe County. So if that's something that you want to help promote, we would greatly appreciate that. And also, if there's a business or manufacturer that wants to transition their fleet to EVs, that's also a project that they could add to our Bloomington Energy Works public-private partnership plan. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about that in further detail if they're interested. But those are two of the tools that we have that can reduce emissions in Bloomington.
So is the city planning to use this? So in terms of the context of this talk,
Yes.
The city's planning to go forward with that
Yes.
method? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Yep.
And is that going to happen? Well, I have two questions. I was just going to
Sure.
ask on that. Is that happening like mid-cycle, like between like in your active like, climate plan? Or is, starting like this year,
inventory.
next year, or is it starting like in 2030?
Well, we just received the data from Duke Energy for 2024. We've been waiting, we asked all of 2025 to receive the 2024 data, so Wes is working on our 2024 greenhouse gas inventory. And so that hasn't been compiled yet or completed, so we will be adding the EIE data to the transportation emissions.
Cool.
So,
Yep, exactly. We have got a kind of software suite we built around to calculate this, and we've actually already been updating it to add EIE data. So the 2024 inventory, which will come out in a couple months, will already feature what we discussed today. And yeah, no, we're excited to switch the induced traffic model.
Is it gonna be applied retroactively back to the 2018 baseline data?
it's a great question.
Awesome question. Very good question. Yeah, so one of the things Zach pointed out that's really, we're lucky with the Google data is sometimes you don't have data year over year, but they actually do have the historical data. So that way we can maintain year-over-year consistency. So we will also be going back and doing the historical calculations to make sure that we're able to fairly compare numbers year over year.
Awesome.
Great question.
That's great.
And one other question I wanted to ask was on the topic of like biofuels, biodiesel, ethanol. Is that counted, or how is that being counted in this method, or is it?
Wes, do we have biodiesel information? I don't.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
We actually do with the INDOT method because we get a list of vehicle registration from from a different department. I'm forgetting it off the top of my head, but from a different state department. Actually, it's the county registration data, and they actually have a split of the distribution of different, vehicle types and what they use. I do remember like it, bio being really, really low, but we do actually include that. Yeah.
I was just asking because some accounting methods will not count it because it's regenerative. So I was just curious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a custom emissions factor, I believe, for it off the top of my head, so we would adjust for whatever is associated with it.
Okay. Thank you.
On the anti-idling campaign, I absolutely love that idea. Are there any cities that have already done that? And what were the results on that? Because I think there's already something in city code about city vehicles not
Yes.
idling, and having taken I forgot the Citizens Academy and going to the police force, they said they have to keep their police cars on because of the amount of equipment that's in there.
Yeah.
Like they can't, it would drain the battery if they were shutting the engines off. So that's not, so this is more towards residents.
Right.
Okay,
yes.
because I've climbed up in plenty of contractors' vehicles and shut them off.
Good.
I hate it.
I do too.
I absolutely hate it. So I will continue to do it. I've gotten
I-
on people's windows, be like, why are you idling?
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
No, I know DC had a law against idling. Anecdotally, though, it didn't work very well because it didn't enforce it.
Right.
Right, yeah.
And not that we wouldn't be able to do a law, most likely because it'd be preempted by the state, but some sort of a campaign, an awareness
Volunteer
campaign. Yeah.
Awareness.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah, I've-
campaigns are most effective when the audience is kids. That's
And-
what they did with drunk driving and seatbelts in the 80s,
Mhm.
was PSAs targeted at my generation, so that we would appropriately shame our parents.
And that's what they're saying, it could be a
It was
shame.
like highly effective, like I'm not being facetious, it was highly
Yeah,
effective,
yeah,
that's
that's
why,
I do
that
have-
they got a bunch of 8-year-olds to yell at their parents about seatbelts, and it worked.
Yeah, and shame is the only way you're really gonna get people
Yeah.
to do it, so.
I do have an example city, and they had stickers that would be placed in parents' windows, and it's like I'm a part of the anti-idling campaign, and so that the other parents would see that while they're picking up their kids, and it is sort of like a community effort, and join this positive campaign for our community.
So I know they wouldn't go this way, but if anybody's seen the guy that gets, annoys people about leaving their shopping carts and, not putting them back, and he's got magnets that he puts on people's cars and they lose their mind. Don't touch my car! Do you see what your car looks like? Anyways, we like the stickers, but hey, if we could get some magnets to put on people who are idling, that'd be great. Talk about shaming. I'm ready to shame some people into stop idling. Come on.
Well, I don't know if we'll do that as a commission,
That's
but do you, man?
Individually.
Just curious, do you know what, Indianapolis is not really a peer city, really, right? But do you know what they do for their accounting method?
I
Would
think
this put
believe
us in
they're
line
using-
with them since we're.
I did look. It was kind of difficult. Theirs was one of the more difficult ones to decipher exactly what they were doing. But I believe they're using. I mean, they have a more more resources than we do, and they're doing
their metropolitan planning organization does sort of modeling about where it's more complicated. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but they have some sort of a model to figure out where people are coming from, and then I think they're counting it based on that. And it's based on the entire metro area of Indianapolis, not just the city.
Yeah.
Was my understanding. Yeah.
Are there parameters in these kinds of data sets and models to look at the kind of mercurial nature of traffic in a place like in a college town to see if there's sort of like optimal intervention times? Like when is the time? Like I mean, we know like it's August and everybody's driving on the wrong side of the road. Like what is the like?
Yeah.
Is that something that's possible with this kind of data set or methodology? Is time series data?
No, I don't think it gives you anything more than the annual estimate. With that, if we use something like streetlight data, which is very expensive, and the contract ranges from anywhere from $40,000 to $150,000 per year for a city. Our transportation department may already have it. I have no idea because they use it for transportation modeling. But with that, you would be able to. But again, it's extremely expensive, and it's I believe using essentially the exact same thing that the Google EIE is. It's just more detailed. But no, the EIU is not able to do that.
Any more questions before we move on?
A quick one, and maybe it was something I missed. Was there a differentiation between the types of vehicles, whether it's EV, hybrid, or gasoline, diesel, biofuel, for the distances, whether it's longer or shorter? Or
That's part of that's kind of one of the criticisms of the EIE is that they don't tell you exactly how they're doing that, but they do say that they're splitting with the EIE based on estimates of what the mode split is. With the NDOT data, we're able to do it, as Wes was mentioning, from DMV vehicle registration data. And then you're able to estimate then from comparing what fuel types that the vehicles are using, and then at the end, that gives you CO2 emissions. With the EIE data, that's one of the valid criticisms. We don't fully understand exactly how they're calculating that, but they say that they are including it. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
So with EVs, is the emission being counted on the power generation or on the mile?
I believe in the power generation. Under our
Okay.
current model is under the power generation. I believe under the EIE.
So like
as well.
someone commuting on an electric bike, that would not.
Yeah, that would be under. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
This may be kind of far afield, but it's something I've been following with the precious metals. I think I've mentioned that, and we've seen a lot of change in silver just in the last month since we met last. And that, whether it's the Samsung battery for EVs, if we do that, it's this feeling of, oh yeah, 20-year lifespan. We can charge it in 9 minutes. It has this 600-mile range. How great is that? But then it takes a huge amount of the silver that is mined, which is often not just straight silver. So whether we're looking at solar panels, AI technology, cell phones, laptops, even in medicine or anything else like that, because I was looking up that China refines, and this is something I've newly discovered in the last few days, is China refines. So it's the whole part of not just having silver, but the refining of the silver. The U.S. has 2 refineries. China has, what I write down, like 27. It's the worldwide leader by huge amounts. So I'm just wondering how, this is my last session with y'all, but just wondering how are we going to look about how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions with the way the world is changing and looks like a new world order is taking place and we're in this shifting time frame. Is that a part of discussions and thinking about when looking at the data, how that, do we have some new columns on the spreadsheets being added, or, pivot tables, or whatever it is we need to know to make some good decisions going forward?
I mean, you're not going to find me making an argument for any type of car ever. I'm extremely anti-car. And I don't think there is an environmentally friendly car that exists
And
as possible.
environmentally
No,
friendly,
it isn't.
silver is
and
going
I'm
to be in
doing-
all of this. So
For
even
sure.
if we reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by working at home, but still using the technology and heating our houses and
Yeah.
all these other things, that we're still going to be using solar panels and relying on something that still is going to be, already in a deficit of over 2 years in regards to silver supply. And I saw where the amounts from last year or the year before last and last year has more than doubled and sometimes tripled with what is going on in the development in green energy. So just kind of throwing that out there for you all to think about. And, I'll probably tune into some meetings periodically and want to, still contribute in some way. But just kind of throwing out some questions, and I've been really big into resilience. How are we going to navigate this, as a community, as a part of the county and a larger area, that when we have so many people driving long distances, which I have done that for their work.
I think that's why it's very hard to track the scope 3 data. So you just mentioned that but I think in the EU, so they're act just introduce a new act is in order to regarding the TCFD things regarding the public companies, they disclose their financial data regarding the greenhouse emission things on that. So there is a standard now only after some certain size of the company, maybe they have employee more than 5,000 people, or they're market share something like that, and then so they are required to disclose the scope 1 and scope 2 data. But below that, there's some small size companies, so they are not required to collect the data things. So I think it is impossible to require each individual people to to do so many things good for the society or for the planet. But I mean I think the EIE data might be a good way to show some of the things that the whole county is doing good things for the environment and planet.
All right, well, we'll probably have to leave it there so we can move on to some of the other items. But this, thank you very much for the presentation, Zach, and thank you, Wes, for coming and spending some of your evening here with us, answering some of these questions. Really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you to the commission for having me, and really appreciate the engagement. Hope you all have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next item on the agenda is we're back to reports from commissioners. So chair's report. Did you want me to share, Jolie? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, let's see. I can make that a little more screen friendly. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so here's the current org chart. Not a whole lot, well, not different at all really since last time. We've got one vacancy right now at the moment, but this is going to change pretty soon because we have 3 farewells to give today. Jamie already mentioned that this is her last meeting with us. Zero Rose is also going to be stepping away after this meeting, and Annalise Jenke's still going to be in town for a little while, I think, but not pursuing another term. And so, just wanted to give thanks and appreciation to all 3 of you for all the great work that you've done since you've been here. I see that I put a typo on this. You haven't been serving since 2005. The commission wasn't even around then, so apologies for that. Really dedicated. But no, there's for everybody who's been, serving for the last couple of years or even since the last year, done a lot of great work and really appreciate all the enthusiasm and effort that you brought to the commission. So thank you, and definitely wishing you luck in future ventures and hope you'll come back. Come back and visit us again. Okay, so let me try to make this a little bigger too, because. So my update slide is growing every time. Okay, it won't get any larger than that. Well, I'll walk you through the important stuff verbally if you can't read it from there. Some of the stuff is is from last time and hasn't really changed, but the stuff that's in bold and blue is the newer stuff. So I'll go to the second bullet point there, the resolution 2025-04, which is about the name change. Nothing really new on this front, except just to mention that there's new leadership now in council and some of the committees. And so I haven't actually checked, but the leadership and membership of the the Committee on Council Processes may have changed, and that was going to be the entity that probably took this up. And so just to say, I'll reach out to them once they get settled in, just to make sure that this doesn't kind of get lost in the noise there. Going down a couple bullet points, the Sustainable Energy Utility Feasibility Study, which is the O'Neill capstone that BCOS is serving as a client for. That begins this week. So Alex and I are planning to, I'm like, where'd he go? We're planning to attend that first class this week. And then the next time we'll hear from them is February 12th, when they'll have a finalized work plan for the rest of the project. And then April 28th is when they'll deliver a final report for us.
When is their class?
When is it? Like what times of the week or Tuesdays?
The first class that you're going to?
Oh, it's this Thursday. I think it's around in the 2 o'clock hour.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If anyone does want to attend that, we can't accept too many more people just to be safe on quorum things, but but we could do another one maybe. The 2025 annual report. So the plan was to have that draft here for us at this meeting to review, but it's not quite there yet. So I'm thinking probably between meetings. So I'll probably email that out to everybody with a link to a spreadsheet that you can fill in with comments and send it back. And then at the February meeting, we can go over all those comments and the changes and stuff. And if it's good to go at that point, we can approve it. Or if there's more changes that people want to work through, then we can go another cycle on that. The Waste Reduction District of Monroe County has a compost bin and rain barrel sale that's coming up. I think they do this every spring, or at least for the last couple springs. And ESD is a collaborator, as I understand, on this, or at least a supporter, I should say, maybe, of this sale. So if you're interested in that, the order deadline for that is April 15th, and then you pick up those supplies on the 24th and the 25th. Grant project reports. So we've got a couple working group grant and sustainable neighborhood grants from the past that we're still awaiting presentations from, and so I'm hoping to fit 2 of those in February. So that would be the working group grant from Canopy Bloomington and the sustainable neighborhood grants from Grandview Hills Pollinator Gardens project, and then hopefully a TerraCycle 2.0 presentation before too long. Okay, so that brings us to the other side of the form here, under the upcoming column. So the strategic planning retreat. So you got an email from me today with a link to a Google form asking you to fill that out. The idea is that we are looking to schedule a retreat, and so we wanted to see what dates worked for people. I listed, I think 5 Saturdays, 4 of them in February, 1 of them in January. And then asking about, do you want like a half day, 3/4 day, or full day sort of event? I remembered later that I had talked about sending around additional options besides that, like other different models. Instead of having kind of a day-long retreat on a weekend, we could do a single regular meeting on a weekday, or we could do a series of working group meetings or something like this. So I forgot to put that into the survey. I sort of remembered people generally liking the idea of a longer day thing, but it wasn't really a formal consensus or anything like that. So I wanted to ask the group, before we go too much farther, is there anybody who's interested in those kind of other options, where maybe we do a series of shorter meetings rather than one big kind of partial day-long retreat? If anyone wants to see those options on the survey, I will happily put those in and just resend it out. So I'll give people an opportunity to just say if they want more options there. Is everybody happy with, maybe you haven't had a chance to look at the survey yet, and that's fine. But it's basically, here's a list of 5 Saturdays, which one works best for you, or rank how well each one works for you.
I just wanted to say that Jolie and I will need to be at the retreat, and it's it's really difficult to have staff capacity for a full day. Our schedules are pretty full, and if it's possible, it would be great if you could extend a regular meeting and have time set aside for your priorities to talk about your 2026 priorities. That would be, I think, easy for everyone since it's already a regularly scheduled meeting. That way, we're not taking up Saturdays.
Yeah, I think the idea behind doing a sort of day-long retreat thing is it gives us a real opportunity to, in sessions, think about our work in different contexts. You know, we can think about where we are right now, think about where we want to go, and then try to figure out how to get there, which is really tough to do in a single working group session or a single meeting, even if we had an extra hour or something to it. And then, you know, this kind of gives us the option to maybe break out into smaller groups, you know, for 10 minutes or whatever to tackle a certain issue, and then come back, share with the group, just try out some different formats for kind of working through these things. I do appreciate the staffing concerns that are there. Is there a reason that staff would have to be present for the full day or the full event?
I think any BCOS meeting, staff is required to be present.
Where's it required? Who's required?
That's pretty typical for
Audrey, do
any
you want to
working
address
group.
that?
Well, if I could, we've had, we've had working group meetings in the past, right, that haven't had any staff there. So that seems similar. I guess the question is it a requirement on us that staff be present? And if so, what is that requirement? Or is it a requirement on staff since, you know, this is the purview of staff, right? Hi, Audrey.
Hi.
Please, go ahead.
Everyone's favorite person, the attorney.
Changing the agenda to add a new speaker.
We are not.
I'm sorry. I'm staff. I assume that I've never been presented as a new speaker as a staff person, but you're welcome to.
We've had a lot of instances of our like agenda being changed by staff without notice, so I just want to make sure we're following the right procedure.
I'm just offering clarification on the topic that's currently being discussed. I'm not presenting a new agenda item.
Okay, so if you had a comment on the question about requirements?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So sorry, Audrey Whittingham, City Attorney. I support Sean and Jolie in the ESD department and this commission if you guys ever have questions for me. The requirement that staff be present at public meetings is a requirement we have on all boards and commissions. And I think it was one that just clearly wasn't communicated super well to this board or commission or to Sean and Jolie in the past. So I only just recently found out that there were committees meeting without staff present at them. That is a unique, this is the only board or commission where that was occurring, to my knowledge at this point. My advice was that staff needs to be at all of them. That is about making sure that open door laws are followed, that quorum is followed. Like all of those requirements still apply to subcommittee groups. And so we need to have staff that have been trained in those issues at those subcommittee groups. And it's mostly a protection for you guys because the city has been sued and over things like quorum and open door law violations. So again, it's a protection for y'all, but staff does need to be present at all public meetings. Any retreat that you have would have to be noticed as it would be a public meeting. It'd have to be noticed as such. I would have to work with Jolie and Sean to figure out the best way to notice subgroups. So I would also need you guys to figure out timing-wise when you would have subgroups form, and then when you would have breakout sessions of those subgroups, because they might need to actually be noticed separately from the entire meeting, which is why when I was thinking about it earlier, which is why it might be more beneficial for you to break it up into not just one long meeting, but a few smaller meetings, because then you would have the opportunity to discuss maybe what subgroups would we want to have, and then at a subsequent meeting work out how the subgroups were going to break out for notice purposes. That's what I have.
Okay, thank you. Is that a written requirement somewhere? The requirement that staff be at all meetings? Is that?
Is it written somewhere?
Yeah, written policy of the
I
city?
don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if it's written. It's practiced by every board and commission, to my knowledge.
So it's a risk thing, is what it is, minimizing the risk, because my understanding is the city would be liable if there was like a accessibility sort of violation or something like that at one of those
Yeah,
events.
absolutely. We're also required to maintain meetings, minutes, agenda notices, we're required to maintain the information from all public meetings indefinitely, forever. And so Sean and Jolie know how to keep that information. But yeah, absolutely. The open door law issues, the quorum issues, what happens when you have a meeting that's on Zoom and Zoom isn't working. What happens when someone decides to attend and participate in a meeting on Zoom more than twice in a row. These people are trained to deal with that and answer that question, so that the actions that you take in that meeting are enforceable. Because if you violate an open door law, let's say someone participates virtually in something that they legally shouldn't have participated virtually in, then whatever action you took isn't valid. So it's really a protection for the city and for the board itself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, well,
Might wanna-
we've got other things to do in this agenda, but I think this is, I don't know, maybe we can have a working session to discuss this more or something in the next couple weeks. Because I think, especially if nothing's written, that's an issue for requirements, because we're not aware that it's a requirement if nobody wrote it down, and if staff's not even aware it's a requirement until a certain point, and it's still not written down. That's, anything can be a requirement if you just say it's a requirement, right?
I mean, Justin, as the chair,
Well,
the city is
if-
asking you to follow these procedures, and I would hope as the chair that you would
Well,
be willing to follow what the city is asking
No,
you to do.
I'm going to move on from this topic. I just think that this is a strange requirement because, in principle, what it means, and I'm not saying this would happen as a theoretical situation, but in principle, if you decided you never want to be cussed to meet again, you could just not attend any meetings, and then we're not allowed to meet even if we're all in the same room and we have a quorum and we've noticed it publicly the way we're supposed to by the open door law. Then we couldn't make decisions because staff isn't present, and so it just seems strange. And okay, very quickly.
I'm sorry, I'd like to clarify that that requirement is coming from me. So you could set a meeting and require the meeting to happen. I would just require that an ESD staff person be present. So if these two were unavailable, then I would require someone else to be present, perhaps myself, another person from ESD. So I'm not trying to say that staff would prevent you from setting up your meeting. I'm trying to say that internally, the legal department is going to require staff be present at a meeting whenever you set that for. Even if you do set it for the entire day, which I think is ultimately your prerogative, totally up to you guys, I would require that staff attend the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on around the city, council elected new leadership. Councilmember Asari is the new president, and Zulik is the vice president, and then Councilmember Daly is the new parliamentarian. I don't think we have Councilmember Rallo on, but I think that's the big news lately. And then if you track things at the state level, you'll know that the Indiana General Assembly is currently meeting for their regular legislative session this year. Not a lot for us to do there, but they do have a lot of bills out right now, and some of them are in the realm of sustainability. So if you're interested, I put some links up there to the different bills you can take a look at. It's good to know what's coming down the pipe, potentially. Okay, I want to talk for a few minutes about elections, which are coming up in March. So first I want to go over some of the rules and requirements that we have here. So a couple of them come from Bloomington Municipal Code. The first section there on officers. So we're required to elect a chairperson, secretary, and treasurer. We also have a vice chairperson in this commission, but that comes from us. And then the other bit there is the Bloomington Municipal Code actually lays out what the duties of the secretary are. So that's not something we can change here. That's where that comes from ultimately. And then there's several provisions in our bylaws that explain how elections are supposed to go. So that first one there is that elections have to happen at the annual meeting, which is defined in the bylaws as being March, by a majority of current membership of the commission. We also have the right to decide annually on the structure of the executive offices. So kind of an interesting concept here is that we can choose whether we want a chair and a vice chair or if we want to have co-chairs. And that has happened in the past. I think there was maybe a 4-year stretch or something back in 2014 or something like that, where there were co-chairs, and then more recently, a few years back, there were co-chairs as well. So that's something we could decide to do. Eligibility, all officers have to be members of the commission, and nobody can hold more than one office at a time. Pretty simple. And then term lengths. So terms start at the close of the meeting at which somebody's elected. You can serve more than one term. And then there's a provision in there about if you have materials and stuff that you use to do your job as an outgoing officer, then you pass those on to the incoming officer. Okay, so real quick overview of the different roles and duties here. So chairperson, you prepare the agenda for all meetings, preside over the meetings, unless you designate it to the vice chair. Distribute the agenda and related documents, and organize and submit the annual report for the commission in coordination with the other members of the executive committee here. I'll go down to the vice chairperson maybe first, and then say that, okay, so that serves as a chairperson in the chairperson's absence, performs the duties as assigned by the chairperson, aids on request. This one I'm not totally sure about. Post notice of vacancies of the commission's advisory committee positions and requirements thereof. This might be a relic from something we used to do. I don't think we have an advisory
when
committee.
we talked about the
Bylaws update,
yeah.
that it might be something that was from a previous version of the bylaws that was removed, or like a previous
Yeah.
type of committee that existed, and that was taken out at some point in the
Yeah.
history, but not the
Right. So that's probably a moot
description
point there.
here. Having held this position for the last 10 months,
Yeah.
it won't ever come up because it doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah, and basically serve as the secretary in the absence of a secretary, or appoint somebody to do that. The secretary, again, this is per Bloomington Municipal Code, which we already went over. Oh, I missed the co-chairs part. Let me back up for a second. So co-chairs are a little different. You've got basically 2 chair people instead of chair and vice chair, and they basically decide amongst themselves, if elected, how they're going to divide those responsibilities of the chair and the vice chair amongst themselves. And then that decision gets put down in writing and then presented to the commission by the next regular meeting. So everybody kind of knows who's responsible for what. There's no confusion there. And then the treasurer facilitates the preparation of the annual budget, which we haven't really had one in a while, or at least income is 0 and expenditures are 0. And facilitate the effort of commission members to identify funding sources in order to execute the strategic goals of the commission. Okay, so that's what officers do. What about the process for elections? So this is where there's not a super set in stone way that we go about doing the actual electing. So there's some flexibility there. So there's a couple questions I wanted to present to get people thinking about. I think we can make some maybe more formal decisions on this at our February meeting next month, so that we kind of know going into March what the process is going to look like. But question 1 is, which structure do we want? Do we want a chair, vice chair, or do we want to do a co-chair kind of thing? That's probably the best decision to start with, because that'll kind of set up how people nominate themselves or how we nominate others. So speaking of nominations, how does that process work? A couple ground rules that I think just make sense. You can make nominations ahead of time, or you can do it at the meeting during the election. Nominations can be made by any commissioner. I guess I didn't put this down, but a commissioner can make multiple nominations if they want. and commissioners can nominate themselves. We don't have a threshold for nominations, or at least we haven't used one in the past, so if somebody gets one nomination, they're welcome to stand for election. And in the case that nominations get submitted, and we'll have a process for this, but in the case that nominations get submitted before the election meeting, then we'll inform the nominee and ask if they're actually willing to serve in that role if elected, and if so, then we'll make sure we announce that during the meeting. So we have an option here. We haven't done this since I've been on the commission, but if we wanted to, we could invite people to make candidate statements. If they accept the nomination ahead of time, they could write something down, or here in person, they could say a few things. Hey, here's why I want to be chair. Here's why I want to be vice chair, whatever. We also don't have to do that. Question 3, how should the actual election process work? So we know from the bylaws that electing an officer requires a majority vote for the current commission membership, but there's a couple different ways we could do this. In the past, we've done it pretty unstructured. Well, actually, no, we've done it sequential, kind of unstructured, but we could just make it kind of a free-for-all where we just say, okay, who's got nominations? And people throw out nominations for whatever positions they want, or they could throw out nominations for a whole slate. I think this person should be chair and that person should be vice chair. And then we vote on that. That's kind of how council does it. At least that's how I saw them do it the other night. We could make it sequential, which is kind of how we've done it the last few times. So first we start with the chair, do the nominations, and then do a vote, and then vice chair, and we go down the line. Or we could do like a sequential ballot situation, or we do that same sequential thing, but instead of just trying to say, okay, there's been a motion for this person to be chair, is there a second? All in favor? That kind of thing. We could instead figure out who all the nominees are for a position ahead of time, and then give everyone a ballot to write down who they think should get that. Quick caveat there is that we can't do secret ballots in a public meeting. So that information would have to be public ultimately. And it also adds logistical overhead. So anyway, those are our options. We don't have to make these decisions now. I want to get people thinking about it, and we can make some firm decisions maybe at the next meeting. But before I finish up this report quick, are there any pressing questions about the election process that people want to ask now?
Is the expectation for the March meeting that the entirety of the meeting will just be elections, or will there be other things on the agenda?
No, it's just a portion. So
It's pretty fast.
yeah.
Okay.
In the past, it's gone pretty fast. Yeah.
It's a real voluntold situation.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It can be, but it doesn't
At least
have to
in my
be.
time.
I wasn't
they've been hotly
anticipating,
contested.
but I was looking at all the options and I was like, some of these could take longer than others. So I was like,
All right, perfect. Okay, so that does it for me on the chair report then. Yes.
I would say, just in thinking about the chair, vice chair, co-chairs, it's helpful to think about if you are interested in doing it, and then like which would be preferable if you are comfortable taking more comfortable doing it in sort of a partnership model, or just like filling in and things like that is helpful for thinking about that. Even if you're not for sure gonna do it, I find that a helpful way to think.
Oh, you're talking about me specifically?
No, I'm talking about
everybody.
Everybody.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Think about
Yeah,
if
exactly.
you were going to take this role, which one would you want? Because you might be nominated. You don't have to take it, but just
Right. Yeah, it is good to think about it ahead of time, because then all of a sudden you just oh wait, no, I didn't think anyone was going to nominate me, and maybe I should make this rash decision right now. It's a good point. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That brings us to Waste Management Working Group. Matt, do you have anything for us?
Report. Let's move
All
on.
right, thank you. That brings us to Council ex officio report, and I don't think Councilmember Rollo is on there yet. So
Flying now.
flying through now. Okay, so that brings us to item 7A, which is the ad hoc committee. So this was the ad hoc committee for the sustainable assessment report that late 2024 we set out to do. The goal was to just get our feet wet, kind of get the muscles moving again as far as generating some of these reports where we assess, the sustainability efforts here. And as the committee started going, which was chaired by Tara, started going through the process, the scope just kind of changed, and we kind of realized that was not what we set out to do originally. Was probably not the best use of time and resources, and so we'll probably find other ways to get at some of those questions in the future. So, being that that's the case, I'd like to make a motion to dissolve the ad hoc committee on sustainability assessment reports.
Second.
And there is a second from the chair, so that's a good sign. Is there any?
Also for context,
Yes.
there were 3 of us, and almost immediately, then there were 2 of us, and then one of the people was not present for like 6 meetings in a row, and so it was just me. And I would like to not do that anymore.
Very good. Is there any further discussion?
Not much of a committee for only one person.
Yeah.
That's right, that's right. All right, then we'll move to a vote on dissolving the ad hoc committee. Tara Dunderdale.
Yes.
Yes. Justin, yes. Matt?
Yes.
Yes. 0 is absent. Zach?
Yes.
Yes. Councilmember Rallo is absent. Quentin?
Yes.
Yes. Ross?
Yes.
Yes. Alex?
One more time.
Yes.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you. Jamie?
Yes, and thank you, Tara.
Yes. Annalise?
Yes.
Yes. Diana?
Yes.
Yes. Shanghai?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, the motion carries and the ad hoc committee is dissolved. Thank you very much, Tara.
And I'll say we didn't get nothing out of it. We got work. We got a resolution out of it, and I think we learned a lot about the challenges of doing any kind of collaborative work like that within the confines of open door policy. So I think it was not a waste of time, but it was perhaps overly ambitious for reality.
Absolutely.
Also, my children were sick for like 2/3 of last winter. So.
Real quick before I move on, Sean, did you have a staff liaison report tonight? I'm debating how much time we should ask for in addition on the
I'll
agenda.
just have a brief update about Bloomington Energy Works.
Okay, perfect. So let me, I think a 5-minute extension should be enough. The resolution will be fast. Okay, perfect. So I would like to move that we extend the time of this meeting to 7:35 unless we get through the agenda faster.
Second.
Okay, there's a second. All right, let's do our roll call vote to extend the time to 7:35. Tara?
Yes.
Yes. Justin? Yes. Matt?
Yes.
Yes. 0 is absent. Zach?
Yes.
Yes. Dave Rallo is absent. Quentin?
Yes.
Yes. Ross?
Yes.
Yes. Alex?
Yes.
Yes. Jamie?
Yes.
Yes. Annalise?
Yes.
Yes. Diana?
Yes.
Yes. Shanghai?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you. All right, we have no resolutions for second reading and discussion, so that brings us to 9A, Resolution 2026-01. I hope you've had a chance to take a look at the resolution. Essentially, and I've lost where it is here, essentially what it does is it just applauds the work that the city administration, here it is, that the city administration had done back in November when the lapse in federal appropriations led to a gap in SNAP benefits being sent out. And so, the Kerry administration, the Thompson administration provided, I think, $46,000 in emergency funding to Hoosier Hills Food Bank in response to that. And also the city council provided resources in the packet materials of one of their meetings for connecting residents with groups that can support, and also encouraging residents to donate if they're able to, and to stay involved sort of long-term and trying to help provide for these food banks and that sort of thing. So this is just a resolution saying, we think that was great and thank you for doing that. And recognizing that, food, the access to food throughout the community is a resilience issue, it's a sustainability issue, right? So it's something that we care about. So I'm introducing this for first reading, so we don't need to debate it or anything yet. It'll come back to us in February for a second reading where we can properly discuss, debate, offer amendments, that sort of thing before we actually adopt it fully. I will move that we pass this on for a first reading. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, all right. Any discussion before we go on the roll call vote for that? Okay, perfect. So this is to advance the resolution 2026-01 to a second reading. Tara?
Yes.
Yes. Justin? Yes. Matt?
Yes.
Yes. 0 is absent. Zach?
Yes.
Yes. Councilmember Rallo is absent. Quentin?
Yes.
Yes. Ross?
Yes.
Yes. Alex?
Yes.
Yes. Jamie?
Yes.
Yes. Annalise?
Yes.
Yes. Diana?
Yes.
Yes. And Shanghai?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. All right, we will revisit this in February for a second reading. And that brings us to the report from staff liaison. Sean, the floor is yours.
I already talked a little bit about Bloomington Energy Works. I just wanted to give you an update. We are creating some momentum. Novo Nordisk has applied for free technical assistance, so we're hoping that they will add their projects to our public-private partnership plan. TASIS will be adding a solar project. We're meeting with IU tomorrow. I'm meeting with IU Health on Friday. I've talked to Cook. Just really trying to get the word out there and get as many projects as possible. We're competing with 48 other cities across the U.S. So if any of you can help spread the word, it's basically, this is available for anybody in Bloomington and Monroe County, residents, businesses, manufacturers. Anyone can add their energy efficiency or solar project to our plan. So if you can help spread the word, greatly appreciate it. And also I wanted to touch on the volunteer portion of this program. Electrify Indiana, they have added some volunteer opportunities to our website. So if you haven't checked out our bloomingtonenergyworks.com website lately, there's links to their canvassing volunteer opportunities. They're basically going to be knocking on doors every weekend from now until April, I believe. So there's plenty of opportunities to volunteer. If you're interested in giving group presentations, you can do that as well. Or if you have a house that has already installed solar or energy efficiency projects, they're looking for people who are willing to open up their house for show and tells. So all that information is on the bloomingtonenergyworks.com website.
Just a quick question, do you know Mady Hirschland?
Yes.
Okay. I'd say go to her, I know she's speaking at Green Drinks.
She's talking about Bloomington Energy Works.
Okay, so she might even have some.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, she's been hired.
Our
She's
primary partner, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, she's great. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, any member announcements?
I will say if people have questions about either the sustainable energy utility thing and they want to come to a class thing, reach out to me. I'd be the point person for that. And I'm also working with Mady on the volunteer component of the Bloomington Energy Works. So if people want to volunteer, I'm also an excellent contact for that.
Just want to make sure you don't reach quorum.
Yeah,
if,
I don't think
if you're
we're-
going
yeah,
to.
Quorum is 7, I don't think we'll have anywhere close to that thing, but it's always good to keep in mind. Thank you, Alex.
I will make sure, please reach out to me so that I can ensure that we don't reach quorum.
Yeah.
I will be responsible for being guardian that does not happen.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. All right, there's no new business, and we are just moments away from our end time, so we will adjourn at 7:34, and we'll meet again on February 10th, 2026 at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.